Welcome to Wealth Without Borders podcast, The Story Form. And today I'm delighted to have with me Robbert Gorris. Welcome, Robbert.
Thank you for being here.
It's great to have you here. And whereabouts are you in the world, Robbert? And what's the weather like today?
I'm in Shanghai, and the weather is okay today. It's a little bit windy and it's getting chillier. Of course, the Midsummer Festival or the Mooncake Festival is coming, so I think that guides to the winter. So it's getting chillier.
Right. Yes, and I'm on the other side of town where it's sunny. The wind hasn't reached us through the
Not yet.
skyscrapers. So for those of you who don't know Robbert, he has lived for more than 10 years in China, and he's come to the conclusion he's still at the beginning of his understanding. We'll probably talk about why. In his professional life, he works for Sovereign, and he's the business development and director of China, and he guides companies in entering China. He's also the proud dad of two daughters who are both undergoing an education in public Chinese school. So that sounds interesting too. So, Robbert, can I just begin by asking you, why did you become an expat in the first place?
I think it started in my studies when I was studying business administration in Rotterdam. There was an opportunity to go abroad, and I looked at the different options, and one of the options was going to Asia, and I wanted to go to Asia because I thought it was interesting. It was in the news every day at that time. It's still in the news every day today, and the possibility was to go to Taiwan and finish my MBA there. And I think that was my first entry into the world outside of the Netherlands. And it was very interesting. And I thought, like, okay, this is definitely something I want to do or stay abroad. And from there, also in Taiwan, I met my wife, my Belgian wife. It came to be that from my door in Rotterdam to her door in Belgium was only 1 hour, but we needed to meet in Taiwan, and we both wanted to go to China. And in the end, she found a job at a Dutch animal nutrition company, and I followed her. And there, I found my first job here in China for the Chamber of Commerce for Belgium, Luxembourg, and the Netherlands. It was in that sense a conscious decision that we both wanted to live abroad because we thought that, I still think that China is the future. And we wanted to be part of that.
I understand that. Yes, China is an unstoppable power, I believe, although people's opinions obviously differ on that. Yeah. So we've talked about the China being the future. If you could define it, what would you say is really special about this region that makes it different from anywhere else in the world?
I think from a personal point of view of like interacting here, it's and doing business here, it has very few points of similarities between my Dutch culture, and that makes it different for me to operate here. But I think as how is China different? It's the mass of the country, the mass of the population. I think the drive of the Chinese people to make their lives a little bit better every day. So therefore, the absolute drive to create something from nothing, and they have been doing it for a while. I think we've lost that drive a little bit in Europe, and then of course the long-term view of China. It's not about what is gonna happen tomorrow, no, what's gonna happen in 5 years, what's the long-term plan. So I think all these things are interesting and make China what China wants to be and wants to become.
Yeah. And then Um, Related to that, I know a lot of people who are very successful in China, and then many who come to China hoping to be successful, but sadly don't make it and have to go back home or go somewhere else. Um, so, what qualities would you say are needed to become successful as an expat here in China?
I would say resilience.
Hmm.
Um, because it's so far off of your own culture, of course, depending on where you're from. Let's take Western Europe as the starting point. Um, there are so many questions that you don't have the answers to, like how people interact, how things are done, and it's very difficult to go back in your own experience to understand, okay, how does it all fit together. So I think every day I feel still after more than 10 years, 11 years in China, every day when I go out of my house, or even I feel challenged. It's out of my comfort zone. I experience something that I haven't experienced before, and sometimes it knocks you down and you need to stand up, and it can knock you down a lot. And there's constant surprises, so you need to be resilient and say, all right, let's go on, let's move forward, and also accept that where you came from has formed you, and has formed the way you look at the world. And it doesn't mean that you need to change, but you need to be conscious about that you have a specific view on the world, and that view can be, I don't want to say wrong, it's different, and you need to accept that. You need to accept that view is different, and that you need to overcome that, and that it's not going to be like you expect it to be. So resilience, I think, is the
Yeah.
key thing.
Fantastic. Yeah, I would agree with that, certainly. And then talking about sort of back home, obviously this year, 2020, has been particularly challenging for everyone
Yeah.
pretty much around the world. But in general terms, how do you cope with being so far away from your family and friends and places that you might have strong emotional connection to?
Yeah, I think I personally haven't experienced that as difficult. I think my family finds it, I think, more difficult than because for me it was a conscious choice. Like I made this decision, and therefore I accept the consequences of not being close to family. Um, I think my parents find it difficult because they don't like the communication through Skype. It's not that they find it technically difficult to handle Skype, but it's just the interpersonal connection of not touching each other, of not giving each other a hug, is they find difficult. So we do travel every year to back home to for Christmas or for summer vacation. And that only, of course, gives you a very short moment with family. What I do feel, I think, is when I go back and meet my old friends, is that your relationship with your friends didn't evolve over time, because you've left, the interaction is very limited, and then when you meet each other, you talk about old stories, but you don't create new ones.
Hmm.
And that's I think when I will go back, maybe that will be a shock for me, that I maybe want to engage with my old friends, but they have moved on, and maybe the friendships that you had will not continue, even if you hope. So I think that will be a shock
Hmm.
when I would return.
And it is, I presume, your intention to return. You're never going to be an expat permanently, or you're not sure?
It's not sure. I think there will be moments of that we will return, either for new opportunities or when the kids go to university or to middle school. I don't know. That really depends on what life will bring. It also depends on how China is evolving, how the world economy is evolving, how our company, the company I work for, is doing, how my wife's company is doing. So I think there's a lot of things that can make us decide to move back.
Right.
And I think it's also accepting that a lot can change and that you are open to the flexibility of moving around. Again, that resilience comes into play. Like, okay, yes, we are faced with certain changes. Okay, what is the best next step? And let's commit to that step, and then stand up again and move forward.
And do you think you were resilient before you came here, or being in China for this 10, 11 years has really strengthened your resilience?
Yeah, for sure. I think I was when I came here. I'm from the Netherlands, so everything needs to be organized, planned, on time, and being here, that changed. And of course, there's two ways you can do that. You can become very frustrated and constantly tell yourself and tell others that China is wrong, they should do it organized, and they should do it in a specific way because this works very well in the Netherlands. But of course, that the only thing that gets irritated is yourself in the end, right? In the end, China doesn't care about what you think. It only influences yourself. So then by accepting that, by letting that go, you become more flexible, and I think that becomes also more resilient because you're accepting that things are not the way you think they are, and I think that builds your resilience and getting knocked down and getting surprised by the many things that happen in daily life in China.
Right. Yeah. I can certainly think of many occasions where that's happened to me.
Yeah, it's and I think it's already as simple as going to the post office and trying to mail a letter. Where you think in your own country, right, that will take me, like, maybe I will go to the post office, blah blah blah, take me 10 minutes. But here you could get into, it could take an hour to mail, and not because the process is different, or you need to have a certain document, or no, the thing you want to send is not allowed to send, or like,
yeah,
you just never know.
Correct. Yes, keeps you on your toes.
Yes.
And then obviously we've talked very specifically about China, but what do you think is generally applicable to your experience locally for someone checking out the podcast who's got a global focus or is thinking about moving to another country entirely?
Yeah, I think it's important to understand that where you are born, it shapes you in the way you view the world. And as long as you accept that you view the world in a specific way, you will also be more open to views from other places in the world. And it doesn't mean that you need to change. Like, I still am the Dutch guy that likes things organized and planned. But I do understand that other people find that less important, or maybe even more important. Maybe I could imagine, and I'm generalizing, that somebody in Germany still thinks I'm very unorganized. I'm completely generalizing now, of course. But I think having that understanding where you are from gives you a better chance of being successful in any place around the world.
Great. And then this is a bit of a tough question, maybe. What's your biggest learning from the last 10, 11 years as an expat?
My biggest learning, I think my biggest learning is that deadlines are something that is in my imagination. Yeah, because I think what I mean is that, like, there's that if you want to do something here, many things can can change. Like so, like for example, our company at Sovereign, we set up help companies to set up their operations here in China, right? And then often the question is, how long does it take? What's the process? What's the steps? And we need to do it in 2 months. Okay, then we make a plan, and then. But many things change, rules change, processes change along the way, and then companies need to adjust. I need to adjust. Our clients need to adjust. Need to change their expectations, and then in the end, the deadlines that have been set are not. They're imaginary. They're not like if the deadline is passed, it doesn't like the world doesn't end. Right. So what I mean with that is, right, you need to accept the situation and move forward as quickly as possible, but understand that things will change and will not go following as planned.
Right.
And by being rigid about your initial plan, I think plans are important, especially in China, but you should not be bound to your plan, because it could be your plan could be just faulty. Staying rigid to your plan is a very possibility that you run into a disaster. So I think that's why I say deadlines are not set in stone. Be flexible in be flexible in what you're doing.
I'm with you. Yeah, and changing the tone just a little bit. We were just talking before this podcast about how many funny memories we've got. I see something that amuses me pretty much every day in China. What would you say is your funniest memory of living here in China?
Yeah, I think I thought about that question also, and I have two. One from my very first days in China, and one from my recent ones. I think the first one was when I first went to Taiwan. I came in Taiwan, and I was appointed a buddy. Jack is his name, and I came just 2 days before Chinese New Year, I think. And Jack said, like, "Oh, Robert, join me to my family in Taiwan, in my hometown, and celebrate Chinese New Year with me." And I said, "Fine." Of course, and I went there, and at one point we were in a situation that we were in his living room watching a movie, and the movie was Der Untergang. It was a movie from about the Second World War, and the movie, it was a fake DVD, not a DVD-9. That if people still know what DVD-9s are, that was the high quality fake ones. No, it was a lower quality. So the movie was in German and subtitled in Chinese. So I was there in a room where the Chinese family was drinking baijiu and fried fish, with the head still on, sitting there watching a German movie with Chinese subtitles. I was like, "Whoa! If this is gonna be, it."
Interesting journey.
Yeah, it was an interesting start of the journey. So that really set me up for accepting that things are different. And I think the last one that really that reached the number one spot instantly. I was at a dinner. This is a true story. It's not made up. I was at a dinner with a friend recently, traditional Chinese dinner, baijiu, and the friend works for state-owned enterprise for the power station. Dinner with some of his Chinese friends, and we're drinking baijiu. It's baijiu, okay, baijiu, drink. And I said, like, "Oh, this is pretty good baijiu. It's really soft." And he said, yeah, that's because we put the baijiu for 24 hours next to the reactor. I said, "Sorry, the reactor?" Yeah. So we put it next to our nuclear reactor for 24 hours, and that gives it the smooth taste. I said, "Sorry?" And he was dead seriously. And then I said, "Okay, I will pass on. I will go to water." So that was like, I was there like flabbergasted. Like, there's so many questions that came from that, like, who thinks about this? What does it do to the baijiu? Does it actually do anything to the baijiu? Should I really drink this? So I think that really that again, after 11 years in China,
Yeah.
I didn't know what to say.
No,
That was
that is
definitely one
pretty
of one of
freaky.
my most bizarre. Yeah,
You have got a bit of a green glow about you from
yeah. So I
the
just
video. So yeah,
yeah.
that's crazy. And then just again to go from the funny to the more serious, perhaps, 2020 has seen a massive impact on expat
Yeah,
movement here. Something I hear different estimates, but 20 to 25% of expats may never come back to China.
yeah.
And obviously, this digital world means that expats may no longer be as needed. How do you feel the expat world will change in the future?
Yeah, I think it will definitely change, but I'm a little bit worried about that the expat or will completely disappear. I think currently you hear like what is the new buzzword? Deglobalization, local for local. Everything needs to be localized, and I think the risk in that is that if you are a foreign company and you have a company in China, you only have local people here, the headquarters will lose touch with what's going on here.
Hmm.
Because if you for example if you look around, if I look around around my house, I've checked that a few days ago, there I don't know how many Chinese English language schools around my compound, meaning that a lot of kids learn English. So the Chinese are investing much more time and effort to understanding our culture than I think how much we invest in the West to understanding the Chinese culture or language. And by not having people from your own organization or from your own cultural background in the working in the country where you have operations, you will even have less understanding about the business you're doing, the business where you are doing, and how everything changes. So I think I understand the deglobalization, the local for local, but I think it will have a boomerang effect that at one point we have no idea actually what's going on here, and I think that will be bad for businesses and bad for companies trying to be successful and moving into this market. So I think having somebody having that making that bridge between Western and Eastern culture, having people here on the ground will always be beneficial for your business as a whole.
Right. Yeah, I have to agree. And maybe we'll see the return of the expat as a result. We'll have to see.
Yeah, yeah, and I think if you want to have an expat here, people always say like, it's expensive, there's cost, but I think if you hire high quality people in China, that's also expensive. And I think if you look for certain senior positions, I think the cost, if you would compare the cost between local and international, I think the difference is not that big. And I think if you don't have somebody from your own organization here, from that understands your culture, has been formed within your organization in your home country, if you don't have that here, you will lose a lot of the understanding, because often the argument is used like, you don't understand, this is China. But that's a risky narrative to go into, because then you will just accept whatever, and you don't challenge. You also don't learn from that. If you're here, you can maybe learn things that you can implement in your company in your home country, right? So not having that bridge you will lose so much information.
Right. I agree with that. And then one last question before we wrap up. If you were to wind back the clock, go back 10, 11 years to you being a MBA student in Taiwan, it was MBA, right? And you were to do it all again, what would you change?
Yeah, if I would have known that I would stay for this long, I would definitely invest much more in the language. The plan was to stay maybe for 3, 4 years. and then see what life would bring. But of course, now we're 11 years in. And if I would have known, I would have been, let's say, take the first year just to learn the language. Because then I think I do think I miss certain elements, for sure, certain elements of the cultural understanding, because it's a lot that has to do with language. So that's what I would definitely change that.
Okay. Yeah, I did interview somebody else who said his advice is to go to a distant backwater city where all you speak Chinese and spend 2-3 months there, and then that's like an intensive.
Yeah, because if I see students coming to Shanghai trying to learn Mandarin, but of course, like Shanghai is very international. You don't need to speak one word of Mandarin almost to go around. Right, it's a cultural experience. But if you would learn the language, then it's better to go like somewhere remote, to a university in a remote area, and learn the language there, because then you really need to be tested. You need to use your language from day one, because otherwise, in Shanghai or in Beijing, you can do fine with English.
Exactly, it's too easy for us foreigners here. All right. Yes. Well, thank you so much, Robert. It's been wonderful to get to know you a little bit more, and people checking out the podcast. If they want to reach you, we'll put a way to do that on the podcast as well, if you're happy with that.
Yeah, perfect.
Great. All right. Well, have a good day on the windy side of Shanghai. And
yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Many thanks for checking out Wealth Without Borders podcast. I'd love you to head over to iTunes, subscribe, and leave us a review. And if you'd be kind enough to do that, I would really appreciate it. And then if you want to know more about what I do, check out wealthwithoutborders.net.